This is Epic Challenge, where we discuss, debate, and dedicate 20 minutes each week to a hot topic in the world of Warhammer. If you give a damn about tabletop gaming, then this is the show for you. Now, here are your hosts, Kicker and Nikki D.
Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's Epic Challenge, the show that challenges your ideas on Warhammer so we can discover the Imperial truth, the heresy of chaos, and the obscurity of the Xenos. Kicker, how you doing this week, bud?
Hey everyone, good to be back in the saddle. I'm particularly excited for this week's show, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good one, and I'm really excited for our guests. I know you are as well. We've got a banger of an episode to cover this week. It's a Warhammer player and personality whose voice I've heard for many years on Forge the Narrative. This is my first chance to be meeting them. So, Kicker, let's go ahead. Let's introduce to the audience who our guest is for this week.
Yeah, and I want to apologize. My voice is extremely lost, but I was so excited for tonight's episode that I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to do it, even though I can hardly talk. I sound like I'm in the mafia, so bear with me, folks.
Mhm.
But as soon as we came up with a concept for Epic Challenge, I knew we had to have this guy on. I have to know, is there any real world tactical advice that can be gained from playing 40K? And who better to answer this question than a real world military commander, Major Red Powell of the U.S. Army? Let's bring him in.
There we go.
There we
Red,
go.
how
Hey,
are
Red.
you? Welcome to the
Doing
show.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, Red, we know we can find you on Forge the Narrative. You're also the captain of the U.S. Army Esports 40K stuff. Is that accurate?
Yeah, captain, team manager, kind of loose with the titles there, but yes, I mean, I myself and a small group of volunteers lead the tabletop wargaming U.S. Army Esports team,
Awesome.
which we're very excited to be a part of and lead. It's always been a great thing for us in the community, and then of course, yeah, Forge the Narrative has been my kind of home to roost and been able to join my great co-host and really the lead. You know, is Paul Murphy and then Adam Camilleri and Tanya Gates. Great
And
teammates.
Red, you've been there for years, right? It's been a few years you've been doing
It,
Forge the
it
Narrative.
has over, I want to say over 3 years,
Wow. Very
maybe
cool.
4 at this point. I lose track after a little bit, but yeah.
Well, as is tradition, and to keep us all accountable, we kind of got to talk about our week in Warhammer. I got to play 2 league games in this week with my tanks, my guard tanks, and I had a lot of fun. I won one game, lost another, but I'm just ready to try a totally different play style. I love my tanks, but I'm like, okay, I want to try maybe some infantry. What about you, Nick? What's going on for you? I mean, like anything fun? You got a tournament,
Uh,
right?
well, I've got I've by the time this airs, I will have played at a tournament.
Okay,
But from the time from our last episode, I am actually ready to start painting my Skaven. I know that's not 40K, that's Age of Sigmar, but it is
it's
Warhammer.
okay, it's okay.
And I've decided on my paint scheme. I've cataloged what paints I need to have, and when I'm at the game store, this for me in real time upcoming weekend for those that are watching the episode in the past, I will have picked up the paints I need to actually start painting my Skaven and getting some colors on time, which I'm really excited about. I love Skaven. That was my introduction to Warhammer. So that's really exciting for me. Red, how about for you? What's been your hobby progress? Or what have you been up to lately?
So I just came out of 8TC in
Nice.
Tennessee this last weekend, where I played Imperial Agents,
Oh,
and I
nice.
ran 50 Death Watch,
What?
and so I had a blast. It was a great time. Our team took fourth place, I believe, and
Congrats.
I was 4-1 with Imperial Agents, and so I had a great run. Lots of fun. Currently, I'm prepping and enjoying Kill Team quite a
Oh,
bit
nice.
actually, and
What
so
faction?
enjoying that a lot.
Imperial Agents or what faction for Kill Team?
No, so Nemesis Claw. I've
Ah,
really for 30K I play Night Lords, and so I picked up the Nemesis Claw for that, and I've really enjoyed that too.
oh, very cool. Very cool. All right,
All right.
Nick, let's do it.
Yeah. All right. So for today here, what we've got here, this is Epic Challenge. Red, welcome to the show where we're discussing the hottest topics. One of our guests are going to be presenting the topic debate relevant to Warhammer community and our hobby. Our guest, that is Red, that is you. You're going to provide your informed, educated, or maybe just passionate opinion that'll help us understand the point of view and maybe make us think or challenge what we think we may know about this item. So on tonight's show, I'm going to be taking the role of the host and asking the questions. Red, that means you and Kicker are squaring off. So that means we're ready to mount up and roll out to begin the debate for this
Yeah.
episode. And I'm going to put on my Imperial Commissar hat and I'm going to order us now to move, move, move. Let's get this thing rolling. So our first question for today and our central, actually, before I jump into the question, let me explain what our theme
Our
or
topic is, yeah.
topic is for tonight. So our topic of discussion tonight is how much, if any, 40K tactics translate to real world military decisions and kind of battlefield roles. So, starting off, question one, first and foremost, 40K, playing the game. Is it realistic at all to, real life battlefields? Obviously, where our technology is probably more limited, but is the gameplay on the tabletop, is that similar at all to what really happens in real life? And Red, for all these questions here, we're going to have you start, and then we'll have Kicker providing kind of a response or a question or a follow up. But Red, what
Sure.
what's it like? What's it like?
So right out the gate, great cliche way to open anything is with a quote. George E.P. Box, great statistician, said that all models are wrong. Some are just more useful than others.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, talking about when we take war games, right? And so, whether informed or opinion or whatnot, I'll just casually drop. I mean, I love war games so much that I have a master's in war game design.
Oh, cool.
And so, when it comes down to it, and the theory crafting behind it, 40K is an abstract model that does, I would argue, a good to great job of picking up on the concepts of tactical employment and execution. And so some of it is a little bit smaller scale than you may take into consideration in some of the real world environments, but as an abstraction, it has a great back and forth to it, that really you can see it, right? And so, if you've listened to me before and I've gone on and on about military things and the
Mhm.
relation to wargaming, this concept, just as a kind of like a concrete example, the concept of maneuver, right? You
Ooh,
don't move in the middle of combat, you maneuver in combat, which is where you seek to gain a position of advantage. And that's a really big thing, how you achieve that position of advantage where you can do something that your opponent cannot in some cases. And 40K, you move, you get into a position, you establish your line of sight, you establish your charge position, and then you close, you either shoot the enemy or you close, charge, and kill them in melee. And that's maneuvering. And this whole concept of being able to get things into position where then you can employ different tactics on top of it. So that's my quick, short, down and dirty on
Okay.
that.
No, 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 that's really like I mean that's really a solid response and hard to counter, and it does make sense. It's a good module, right, to review. So what about this? In 40K, even a simple guard las pistol can hurt a Night Titan. But in the real world, there's no way a 9 millimeter Glock is going to penetrate a Sherman tank hull. Um, I know that like are is that at all like relevant in 40K? Like, I mean, is that at all real world relevant? Like, can anything hurt anything? No, of course not, right? I mean,
Right.
right.
Well, and
So
so 30K,
yeah,
just like 40K did in 7th edition, has armor values, right?
yeah,
And in 30K, there are guns that can't do anything
you just
against
accept it.
armor values.
Yeah,
You just have to, you didn't bring the right gun. You have to get a different one if you're
yeah.
going to try and hurt that armor value. 40K has continued to make what I would call progress as a competitive war game that
Mm,
has, in trying to be competitive, has continued to push when you take it as an abstraction of warfare and tactical execution,
yeah,
but then when you start to bring in this competitive set where people are trying to play the game against each other to have this competitive achievement, you're trying to accomplish something else. You're
okay,
no
good.
longer trying to abstract warfare,
Well,
and
better
you're
thought.
trying to do something else with it, and therefore and again, I don't disagree with the direction because of what they're trying to accomplish. They went in the direction where everyone has a chance,
Yeah,
right? It
and it
just comes
makes the
down to the
game
dice.
also simpler, which has always been a goal for Games Workshop for a while, is to make the game a little bit more approachable. So that
Accessible,
yeah,
yes, yeah,
accessible.
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
cool,
I think
cool.
I think Red, that's where it comes down to the difference where there is a difference between war and a war game as it goes to this part where the emphasis for the game is that it is a game that both players get to have agency and that it's removing or reducing those opportunities where it becomes uninteractable for the players because we want it to be fun. Nobody wants to play
Right.
a war game that is boring or where you can't do anything. In real life war, you probably do want to put your opponent in those positions, and that's probably what you're going for
Yeah,
very, very often. But when we're playing a war game, not something that we want to be doing. So, with that, I'll move us to our next question here, and already really enjoying this conversation and where we've got this part headed. But question number two, and this one really made me laugh. Is 40K or Warhammer in war games, are those taught in things like officer training school, and are they actually beneficial to the officers or those that may be utilizing some of these skills in real life scenarios?
So, short answer, yes. However,
however,
40K is probably not the venue in which any, if not 99% will ever see. Wargaming is used, the function and where wargaming was brought in, and how things like the Prussian military brought it into effect. There's this great game, and there's a convention out in Germany called Spiel, which is named after one of the first like major war games that was employed in training and development of officers. And it's got a bigger historical breakdown to that. But yes, there's what we currently call them are tactical decision exercises,
Mhm.
which are effectively simulated war game kind of scenarios that can be employed in all sorts of ways versus, whether it's using miniatures or it's on a whiteboard or what have you. That's all back and forth and meant to help uh, junior leaders walk through certain scenarios, tactical scenarios. And then from there, so that's a great, as far as training to
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
that immediate question. But then when you move into the evolved version, wargaming, funny enough, and especially with some army folks, and many of them out there, if they're listening to this, will laugh. Wargaming in the military sense, if the army can find a way to kill something and make it not fun, what many people know wargaming to be in the army professional atmosphere is this very grueling process that drags people through step by step. It's meant to synchronize effects and efforts, and
Sure.
it's meant to kind of test a plan. So you have a plan, it's a whole step of, and I argue one of the most important plans. And using this notion of bringing in something like 40K or miniatures or things like that, there are ways to make it engaging and more applicable, and help people run with it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be about dice. It could be an aspect. Some people try to use that to help. What happens when this part of the plan fails, and dice do a good job of helping to demonstrate that. But there are ways that in a much more mature professional environment, we find ourselves wargaming through problem sets. That again, I wish it wasn't a dirty word, but sometimes it finds its way in there. But I'd like to hope that the people I've worked with in the past and the teams I've been on, we found engaging engaging war game approaches to make that a different way.
Cool,
That's great.
cool. I just thought maybe you guys playing, tabletop war games in the army was just a way to collect armies for fun or for work while on duty. But seriously though, I do get it. Playing tabletop war games may not be a one-to-one for current military strategy. It can only be so accurate, right? But what I thought about just now hearing you speak was it kind of primes people to think in a certain way, much like going to grad school was for me. I learned way more via firsthand experience in the field, but grad school prepped me to think critically and conduct myself in a certain way when I was in those situations. So I feel like maybe that's kind of the advantage of war games. And Red, I think I've heard you've played do you call it war games too when you're in the field, like doing like real world like troopers in
Simulations
battlefields?
or
Yeah, simulations. Is that considered wargaming as well when it's like real time, real person, you know, I guess in
In
the field?
this, you could, they
Yeah,
won't typically, like, you won't hear them call it that, but you could. I mean, the term simulation, right? And so when we talk about training, there's
mhm,
three aspects to training, and constructive training is one of those where you're hands on
yeah,
conducting the training. And then there's a simulation and simulated environment. And so that's a whole aspect to it where we use lasers and
yeah, yeah.
to be able to target each other and stuff like that.
yeah.
But it plays into that. And so
Cool.
it's could you
And
use the word? You could.
could
Is
you?
it used? Not really.
No, no. All right. One last question I have to ask, Nick. Don't hate
Go
me.
for it.
So on the scale in the military, right? Are you talking like kill team size, 40K size, epic size when you're doing your, or do you have it all? Like what do you
Apocalypse.
apocalypse? Yeah. What kind of format?
So when it comes down to it, and I love this question because it is, when people talk about it, and there's a in the professional environment, there's a different scaling when it comes to tactics, operations, and strategy, right? And so in the profession, tactics, I mean, tactics is what happens, right? It's one big thing. Operations is this massive, I mean, we've heard military efforts called operations, like Operation Torch in World War II, and that was the whole scale of going through Africa up into Italy and things like that. And then you have strategy, and strategy is something that arguably um, generals don't even touch strategy. But
Yeah.
then we find in our conversation people throw the term strategy around, and it's just understanding where that forum is, right? That's a language thing. But when it comes down to us, and the level of it. I mean, I talk to people all the time. A 2,000 point game, when you think about it, the number of units that are involved. I mean, 2,000 points this last
Yeah.
weekend, I was running, had maybe 8 units. I mean,
Yeah.
I expect or would hope that a lieutenant or captain could easily manage that kind of scope or
Yeah.
scale, right? I mean, that's like tactically, but then you start getting into companies and battalions, and you start looking into big blocks of things. And the Army does a good job in a lot of its planning efforts, in my opinion, of how it aggregates things into making them simpler, more digestible, conceptual blocks of things. But I joke around about how, like, as a lieutenant, you play like incursion games, 500, 1,000 point games, but as a captain, you're playing relatively 2,000 to 3,000 point games, and then it just continues to scale up from there.
That's cool. Very cool.
As before we go to the next question, I'll Red, as you're explaining this, I just I'll make this point, and because I thought of this, I realize it's a different branch, but what I heard from your response was that we could see in the next Top Gun sequel, we could see Tom Cruise and Glenn Powell and Miles Teller. We could see them doing Warhammer as a simulation in the next Top Gun sequel. That is
That's
what I
incredible.
heard. Yeah,
That's incredible.
guaranteed that it's going to be happening. That we're gonna, if they can do volleyball or football as a team building, why can't they be doing Warhammer
For
in the
sure.
next Top Gun sequel, right? So
That's
Tom
right.
Cruise,
That's right.
that's your free idea from me. Not that you need it, but I think you should take my advice on that one. But
Nick, I see you changed the third. I'm looking at the show notes. Oh, surprise question, Red. Get ready.
oh yeah, so third question. This one I added in a little bit like behind the scenes magic. Kicker and I usually have some shared responsibility as it goes to the questions here. But this third one I kind of changed a little bit because when I was thinking about Warhammer and war games, we used to play in past editions where it was really kind of just you hold objectives and you kill things. And then when Games Workshop started taking over the missions, we were introduced to secondaries. Now, some tournament formats like Adepticon famously or Nova did have these secondary items. And when those came out, it was somewhat controversial because there were some people saying, like, hey, I don't want to have to focus on area denial, or why do I have to engage on all fronts? That's not what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be going and killing the enemy. So I figured I would take this as an opportunity where, from a war game perspective to, real life application, do secondaries like does
Secondary
does
objective.
that secondary objectives as we played in the game, but those sort of tactical elements, right? Are those real facets of a war scenario that you would be seeing?
So the secondaries, in my opinion, do two great things. One part, to answer your question more directly, yes, there are. What I like about secondaries and what it does for a lot of it is that it creates uh, asymmetrical objectives and
Yeah,
directions where we don't have the same objectives, and I have to try
Uh,
to do something that you don't. And in many cases in tactics, you don't know what the other person is trying to accomplish
yeah,
outside of the bare bone concept of that you're just going to try and kill each other,
yeah,
right? When it comes to this conflict, you just want to, if there's anything you can do, killing the other person's usually pretty effective in allowing you to do everything else. But outside of that, you don't know all the other things they have going on. You can look at certain things, and we do a lot of effort when we look at the terrain and we look at like the context in which we're fighting of what's important and what's not, and trying to take care of that. However, those abstract objectives, or the asymmetrical objectives, I think is pretty clutch when it comes to the introduction of secondaries, which is I really appreciate that.
cool.
Um, the next part of this, and going to like, well, I can't do that. I can't do this thing. What I really, really like, and 40K does a good job of this, especially in one-on-one games. Team
okay,
games, you're allowed to skew, right? You can
Yeah.
yeah,
skew off of each other. Um, when it comes to the asymmetrical objectives and secondaries, and you have to have what we like to refer to in a tactical environment combined arms. Combined arms is this tried true thing that the Dutch, or, and no offense to the Dutch, they historically they've got a bank on it in history at one point where they were able to do combined arms better than anybody else. However, they were not the first ones to do it. Rome was able to pull it off, right? The Roman legions,
hmm
uh, Alexander the Great. You just keep going back and you see where people were able to combine arms, bring together multiple effects, make your opponent have to fight multiple dilemmas while you're able to accomplish multiple things, is really the core way of it. That's what I really like about how the secondary system was implemented and incorporated into 40K as we know it today,
yeah.
because you have to have combined arms to be really effective at it.
Do like that. I like that. Cool. I got no response. I mean, that's like, okay, cool, awesome. you win. Nick, I see you have another question in there, which I actually really like. Why don't you ask
Yeah.
that? Fred?
So as a follow-up part of it, this was just secondaries and 40k. We have some shuffling of those, but is there a secondary that perhaps has been a part of prior editions or prior mission packs that you would like to see reintroduced into our current pack, or is there something, maybe a secondary that we've never seen, that you think would be a good idea?
Yeah, something similar that we'd see in the real world.
Yeah. So, you know, I think in a lot of cases, and it's a little difficult in the tactical scenarios that we look at, right? Defend stronghold. That's one that, like, it's really easy. It's 3 points. You just
Yeah, yeah,
hold your backfield kind of deal, right?
Mhm.
But there's one that, if I was gonna, so I love the concept of secondaries. I love them, but I'll be upfront and honest, I'm not one of those people who studies the secondaries
yeah.
like in great detail. I
Okay.
love the randomness of them and how they hit it, and I just like rolling with it, right?
Yeah.
I'm the person who still like sees the initiative, as far as mechanics go, right? And so I like randomness and I like being able to play to that. I don't sit there and like think that my army's got it all figured out by any means, but I like rolling through the scenarios. Anyways, if I was gonna adapt defend stronghold, I would turn it defend stronghold and containment into this deal of where you kind of got to hold like your back edges,
Okay.
because there's a lot of cases and where you want to prevent the enemy from flanking you, from
Yeah.
getting into your interior
Oh, that's kind of
lines
cool. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
trying to hold back like your own board edges to whatever extent, because one objective in your rear, like that one, it's pretty easy to pull off, three
Yeah.
points. But if it was, you have to prevent an enemy from being within 6 inches of your backboard
Crazy.
edges, that kind of deal.
I like
Like
that.
that's something that you're protecting, and that's something that I think could come up as a tactical secondary that
Yeah.
that might apply.
That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. And I love the random effect of the current card dynamic that we use in
Oh yeah.
40K. I mean, that's fun. I think that some people are frustrated because it's maybe too random, but I think it
Yeah.
speaks to what you're saying is it keeps you on your toes. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know how you're going to fix the problem until you get it. So yeah, no, I like that a lot. That's secondary. We have to call it Reds or Powell secondary, whatever. That'll become a thing. I like it. I
The
like it.
Powell maneuver or something
Powell
like that.
maneuver, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
just defend the.
Yeah,
All right.
before we wrap up or go to this
Oh
part, I'll,
yeah.
I'll note when secondaries were introduced, and one of my good friends who has also served in part of the U.S. Armed Forces and is actually still currently serving, he brought this up to me, to saying like, well, hey, this secondaries are your objectives can be different. And Red, you talked about it, where there could be tactical
Yeah.
differences, and the example that he gave that I think everybody can relate to, probably because they've probably seen the movie, but Saving Private Ryan, right?
Hmm.
Like the objective there is to save Private Ryan, right? Is to go and get him back. Like, is there killing that happens along the way or defending position? Like, yeah, sure, but like the win condition in that was truly bringing the
Money
private
back.
home. So
Yeah.
in that vein, I would say, or as my buddy and I had joked about this then, and I'll bring it up now, where it's like, if you've got a unit that's in no man's land or in your opponent's deployment zone, like they have to make it back to your home objective, like specifically targeting a certain unit that needs to make it back, have that as a saving, saving sergeant,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever
yeah, yeah.
title on that
I
part of
like
it.
it.
So
I like it.
before we wrap up our bit of a wild card question that's not really related to Warhammer, but just more things globally. Red, what is your favorite wartime movie, and is there one that you feel like is most realistic?
You can have two separate ones, or they could be the same.
Yeah.
Hmm. Um. So, wartime movie. Yeah. It's some of it is crazy how real some of it can be
Hmm.
for some of the more modern stuff. But the easily, I mean, I guess, and it's kind of unfair because Band of Brothers is out there, right? Like
Yeah.
Band of Brothers is such an amazing series, captures so much. I think a lot of people would think I would jump straight to Fury because
Yeah,
of tanks, and I'm a
yeah.
tanker and tank crews. And I'll tell you, that movie does a wonderful job of capturing tank crews
Oh,
and
cool.
what it's like to be together. But We Were Soldiers is probably
Oh,
like
yeah.
that one always strikes the chords because it hits on so many levels.
Yeah.
There's this tactical thing going on. There's stuff at home, which is a very real thing that everyone, that plays out in so many ways. Um, and there's so much with that I mean, it really, it from the train up all the way through, it does such a good job. And so that one is probably my
Cool.
top of the line wartime. But if we were going to make a quick, real side jump, Edge of Tomorrow. I know we mentioned
Oh
Tom
yeah,
Cruise.
yeah.
As
Yeah,
far
yeah.
as sci-fi
I love that
movies
movie.
go, Edge of Tomorrow is pretty fantastic. With the
It's so good.
they did a great job.
I gotta say, man, I love Black Hawk Down. I know it's based on a true
Yep.
story. I don't know how realistic it is, but I've watched that movie so many times. And I mean, is that at all realistic, Red, or is it just all? I mean, it
Oh,
has.
I mean, there's some definite elements of realism to it. That I mean that and there's enough of the history
Yeah,
woven into that movie
Yeah.
that it does. I'd like to say that they did justice in their tribute
cool,
to a lot
awesome,
of the valiant efforts of
awesome,
things that
awesome.
happened historically.
Nick,
Yeah.
what about you, man? Come on.
I got two favorites, and I'm a big fan. I'm really interested in submarine related movies and items. So, The Hunt for Red October. That's more of like political thriller, than it is.
Sure,
But
sure.
to me, that's my dad showed me that movie at some point, probably when I was too young to understand or get it. But it's always been one of my favorites. I try to rewatch it once a year. I love Hunt for Red October, and then the other one is U571. That's based on a real story. The movie it has been kind of dragged quite a bit, and it being
Sure.
quite inaccurate, and in regards, especially to the role that the British played in that, and really downplaying that. But the movie, as far as entertainment goes, for a war movie, I think is really fantastic. It's on Netflix currently, if you want to give that one a view. So those would be my two recommendations. But that is it for our epic challenge for this week. And Red, first and foremost, we want to thank you for accepting our epic challenge and joining us here on the show. Before we wrap up and get everything here, tie up this episode, can you let folks know, again, we said at the beginning, but we'd give you a final out here. Where can folks find you? Where can they listen to you? And is there anything else that you would like to call out here before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate it. Again, you can hear me just about weekly on Forge the Narrative still. Me, Paul, Adam, and Tanya, you can find us YouTube, Spotify. I think Paul's got us all over the place. And so podcasts, you have it. We do both audio, and then we also, like y'all, we do video as well. So
Yeah.
come check us out, join the conversation. We love to have everyone. And then also for U.S. Army Esports, Black and Gold Wargaming on Facebook is our group that you can check out. And then also, folks, I'll give you all my information. So if anybody wants to reach out to me to talk about the U.S. Army Esports team, or they're interested, that for us it's a community outreach team, and we are we welcome anybody. I mean, honestly, the team, that there's a very specific aspect of it, of active duty folks, but really veterans, National Guard, reserves, even people from other branches, or people who haven't even served. We're just a community that's looking to continue to welcome people and continue to grow wargaming.
Yeah, we'll put those in the show notes, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Red, thanks for having you. Thanks for joining us. Kicker, how about for you? Wrap it
yeah.
up.
So gets what's around the corner. Red, are you going to Adepticon by any chance?
I hope to be there. I'm not sure
Yeah.
in what capacity, but I've always loved Adepticon, and
Awesome.
I really hope I'm going to be there again.
Well, next week's episode is definitely going to be one for you if you're into Adepticon. We're really, really excited to spotlight that very large event. Nick, why don't you take us out, man?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for joining in for Epic Challenge and going through this exercise, this real life simulation today. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a bit of a departure from our usual topics or discussions on some of the tactics and things like that of Warhammer. But that's what this show is going to be. It's Kicker and I talking with some amazing people that really have a lot to add to the Warhammer community. So be sure to check out our episode again next week. Thanks for viewing. Make sure you like us on Instagram. Make sure you like us on Facebook. Make sure we're still, at least at the time here of recording, still on Spotify, not yet approved on Apple, but we're coming up. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on the video here too as well. Do you have other movies that you like? Do you have other thoughts that you want to share? We really appreciate everybody that's been commenting on our videos so far. So keep that going, and we're going to look forward to putting out some more great content. But that's all for this week. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you next time.
Peace out.
Thanks for listening to Epic Challenge. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And be sure to check out Green Banner Event Co., the ones who help make this show possible. Tune in next week for another Epic Challenge.